जिंदगी के कई मौसम अनुभव किया मैंने। हालात बदले, लोग बदले, अगर कुछ नहीं बदला तो बाबूजी की सिखाई हुई एक बात, वो कहते थे जब नींव मजबूत हो तो फिर चाहे वक्त के उतार चढ़ाव कैसे भी हो, हम उनका डट कर सामना करने में सक्षम होंगे। बिल्कुल इस पेड़ की तरह ऐसा ही एक अटूट रिश्ता जोड़ता है आपके साथ आईडीएफसी फर्स्ट बैंक। विश्वास, पारदर्शिता और सच्चाई का, क्योंकि इनको आपकी सफलता में अपनी जीत दिखती। मैं तो जुड़ चुका हूं इनके साथ, आप भी जुड़ जाइए ना। आईडीएफसी फर्स्ट बैंक, ऑलवेज यू फर्स्ट।
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Outlook Business Leading Edge 2021. Welcome to today's discussion. The discussion point is digital transformation, India opportunities and challenges. I say India opportunities and challenges not only from the point of view that this is a huge opportunity for Indian IT service providers in terms of catering to this global opportunity where everything is going digital, as much as for the India businesses that are realigning themselves to this new digital world. According to a NASSCOM McKinsey study released earlier this year, Indian IT services will touch $300 to $350 billion in 5 years with an annual growth rate of about 10% per annum, as opposed to 7.5% averaged over the past 5 years. This growth will be driven primarily by digital services, which currently accounts for 30% of revenue, but is expected to go up to about 50% in 5 years. To discuss this and more, we have a very eminent panel of speakers: Sandeep Patel, Managing Director, IBM India and South Asia; Puneet Chandok, President, AWS India and South Asia; Rajesh Nambiar, Chairman and Managing Director, Cognizant India; Anuj Kadian, Partner, McKinsey India. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me on this discussion today. Anuj, I will pose the opening question to you as I quote from the McKinsey report. When something phenomenal comes our way, we are almost never prepared. How prepared do you think is the Indian IT service providers are today in terms of seizing this digital opportunity?
Yeah, I think, I have to say, one, the opportunity has been brewing for a long time, and obviously it got really accelerated over the last 12 to 18 months. And the IT Indian industry, even historically has been growing at market leading growth rates. And even during the last 12 to 18 months, they've just done phenomenal in terms of coming together and capturing the opportunity. They are very well positioned to continue that market leading growth even as we look ahead. The numbers that you quoted in terms of accelerating to 10%, getting to around 300 to 350 billion by 2025. And it's largely on the back of, investments in capabilities they have made over the last few years, and they are continuing to make. Today, digital forms almost 30 to 50% of their portfolio. They have really stepped up the pace at which they are acquiring new companies. They are investing aggressively in digital reskilling. And the digital portfolio is what they are betting on to kind of drive the forward-looking growth. And so far, they have done really well.
Rajesh, from your perspective as an IT service provider, over the past 12 months, in what way has the delivery operating model for software services company really changed, if at all it has? And how have you at Cognizant beefed up or realigned resources in terms of staffing, sales, services, the way you handle clients? How has it all changed?
So, Mahalakshmi, first of all, I think, as you rightly said, I think there's a huge shift in everything that we see. We believe that digital maturity has been the differentiator for success. Of course, during this pandemic, and will continue to be so in the recovery process as well, right? So the pandemic actually wrote the business case for digital future. As physical channels were locked down, digital channels became essential, right? So COVID-19 obviously accelerated the pace of digital disruption, I would say, by about 5 to 10 years. Driven by the adoption of some of the remote working and, of course, the digital channels, right? And the digital marketplace, shifting consumer behaviors and expectations, including remote working, and of course, the centrality of human centrality of our employees' health, etc. We're all here to stay in many ways. Now, what we are seeing in companies across different sectors is very similar to the so-called K-shaped recovery that you talked about, previously, when you talk about the wider economy, right? So that's something which I think will continue to be the case. And even companies which weren't further along in their digital journey, pre-pandemic have suffered badly. Whereas those who went into the crisis as the transformation leaders have not only recovered, but also have emerged stronger than before. So in some sense, the pandemic actually widened the digital divide between the digital natives and the sort of the legacy economy companies in many ways, which have struggled to shift to a fully digital model, if you may. Yeah.
So Sandeep, you are looking at things from a very, very India perspective. And what kind of eagerness or urgency do you see amongst Indian companies? And you can tell me if you want to divide it in terms of digital natives versus, people who now realize that it is an imperative and want to make that change. How are these large and small mid-sized companies really reacting to this development? I know small companies, SMEs is also a priority area for you. So you can tell me about both.
Yeah. So look, I think, and I don't really think it's fair to distinguish between digital natives and the traditional companies. I think what happened with the pandemic, right, is it accelerated digital transformation like never before. So in terms of the digital transformation journey, what we would have seen happening in 5 to 6 years now is happening in, within a year or probably within the next couple of years across companies of all sizes and industries. Digitization, it's already impacting business models and consumer experience. And in many respects, everyone was forced to sort of adapt to this new normal, right? So technology in many respects, I keep making this connection that technology has almost become the sutradhar, if you will, for enabling a whole new work paradigm, driving innovation, as well as building sustained resilience, which companies have had to, irrespective of size, as we navigate through three fundamental shifts. I think one is that we are starting to see digital ecosystems evolve around us. So the question in terms of how do you adapt to that and how do you become more relevant in those ecosystems, right, is a question that every company has had to deal with in some way, shape, or form. Now, the expansion of new business models is another phenomenon that happens within these new digital ecosystems to drive both cost efficiencies, agility, and more importantly, to build a level of trust. And with all of these, there's the emergence of a new network economy that starts to emerge around this, right? And so the whole notion of being able to adapt to this and cope with this is really, really important. So I'll give you a couple of data points actually that will to bring this to life. So we recently did a Institute of Business Value. We have this research that we do with direct interactions and whatnot. So we polled about 3,000 CEOs around the world, and out of those, I think over about 120 of them were in India. And that attempted to delve into the minds of the executives who led organizations through probably a year which was most uncertain, right? So 6 out of every 10 CEOs, Indian CEOs, and this is specifically in India, they expected technologies like cloud computing to deliver results by 2023. Now, you overlap on top of that another study that we published just a few months early, and the contrast was stark. According to that study, though 90% of companies globally were sort of on the cloud by 2019, only about 20% of the workloads have moved to the cloud environment, right? So this is another one where I think technology has become ubiquitous to drive agility, enable a hybrid workforce, drive operational efficiency and customer engagement in a fundamentally different way. So I think all companies, large and small, and I think it varies a little bit by industry, but all companies are starting to move towards this digital transformation in some way, shape, or form, obviously with the right levels of thought around sustainability, security, and so on, but not just because they want to, but because they have to, because that's what their customers are demanding and that's what their ecosystems around them are demanding right now.
Puneet, is that your assessment as well? The distinction between digital natives and the traditional companies in terms of the size of ambition in terms of, or the imperative to go digital, has that really shrunk sizably?
No, I agree with what Sandeep said, right? We can obviously make the distinction and they adopt cloud and technologies differently, but I think the ambition is similar, right? Which is they all want to digitize their customer journeys, they want to digitize their processes so that their employees can be more effective, and they want to reduce technical debt, right? Because you want to be a lot more agile as you go forward. I think what we're seeing, Mahalakshmi, from my vantage point in India is just a perfect storm of digitization, right? Because customers today have realized that you got to think deeply about technology and cloud as the world becomes more and more dynamic, right? And building onto Sandeep's three trends, at least as I talk to customers, there are three things that at least I'm picking up which are relevant to the conversation today. First is everybody's realized that cloud reacts well to uncertainty, right? And businesses that were thinking deeply about technology and building architectures on the cloud will come out of this pandemic much stronger, right? Because they were agile, they were scalable, they could go up, they could go down. Second, I think most customers and most businesses, it doesn't matter if you're a digital business or a SMB or a startup or an enterprise, have realized that digital is no longer an optional thing to do. It's a question of survival, right? And this is again where Sandeep and Rajesh were headed as well, right? It's a must do. It's not an optional thing to do. And then third is the speed at which I see customers move now, right? It's a completely different metabolic rate, right? All the conversations which were conceptual, theoretical around full stack and digital roadmaps used to run into quarters and years. Today, nobody has the patience, time, or money to do that, right? They want to get it done in weeks, if not months, right? So now that, I think, just if you look at the speed, if you look at the way it's being adopted and the way people are now approaching this, it's becoming a lot more real and almost a question of survival versus a nice thing to do.
Sure, absolutely. I guess that is what the lockdown has really done. It was never it was never a question of whether you need digital, but the cost benefit was, you could go a little slow, you could get this done over 5 years and you would have still had your business intact. The transition would have been far more appealing and easier to sell to the board than making a heavy expenditure in favor of moving digital. Now tell me, who are really the front runners in this whole digitalization drive? Because now it concerns business.
Sure. So, when I would start by saying, the trend has been very, very secular, but especially over the last, 12 to 18 months, I think a couple of sectors just saw an exponential increase in that, right? So first is obviously, everything to do with e-commerce, right? The second, I would say, media, OTT, again, kind of the pace at which the digitization initiatives kind of got launched and adopted has been, pretty significant, right? In addition to that, even across other sectors, right? If you take healthcare, the innovation and the adoption of technology over the last 12 months, even in a place like India, where 12 to 18 months back, like a telemedicine or a video medicine was kind of not the norm, but today everyone is very, very comfortable, right? So healthcare, fintech, adoption of digital payments. So I would say it's a very secular trend, but a few specific verticals that I just mentioned saw the lion's share of kind of acceleration.
Sandeep, any particular trend that you have noticed in terms of sectors that are front runners?
Yeah, sure. And
e-commerce, of course, is one, but that apart.
Yeah, e-commerce, obviously, e-commerce and health. I hear that. Let me sort of put it in context, I guess, first, and then I'll talk about some of the sectors. I think where the acceleration has happened, and I think just I'll key off on something that Puneet said earlier about, customer journeys have had to be remapped, right? Because in the digital world, it's no longer about, whether you're a bank customer or whether you're a telco customer, right? You're a customer in the e-space. And therefore, I think different organizations and different industries have had to get up to par. And I think for different reasons. So one, where I've seen a tremendous amount of acceleration, I think both in terms of ensuring sustainability, which is making sure that they've got the right sustainable architectures, infrastructures in place, as well as catering to the digital consumer is financial services. So if you think about digital banking, that's sort of the new norm. And also ensuring that you are able to, serve the digital consumer in a fundamentally different way. Now, they were already a little bit ahead of the game, but being able to also sustain a work from anywhere work structure, which I think in India, many banks actually scrambled to make that happen because they were not used to that, right? And then also making sure that that digital experience and that customer experience was differentiated so that when someone was interacting with a digital native e-commerce company, that experience was similar to what a traditional bank was being able to offer. So that whole domain has accelerated significantly. So that's one. The second area where we see a lot of movement is in manufacturing, where they are trying to create more industrial automation and thinking about connected and accelerated supply chains and doing that in a much more effective manner, right? And in some instances, I think across both financial services, manufacturing, in the area of intelligent industrial automation, and thinking about it that way, that is resulting in clients are starting to see about a 40 to 50% increase in efficiency as they look at that. And then the third domain, which I think cuts across several essential services, is in public services or digitized government services, which I think has now started to become the new norm. So I think all of these three domains, we are starting to see a lot of movement, and in different dimensions, right? It's both around agile infrastructures, thinking about really ensuring security and sustainability in a fundamentally different way. And third is either better connecting with the end customer in the new mode of connection and new digital customers, but also driving efficiencies across the supply chain.
So Rajesh, what does this mean for a company like you, or for that matter, all service providers, in terms of how do you attack verticals? And what kind of shifts do you see over the next 3 years? I mean, are there any certain pockets that look brighter where you want to fast track or front end growth versus some others? Is there a realignment of sort happening?
So broadly, so that's when we look at, if you're talking from a cognizant point of view, we think the industry at an inflection point in the broader digital adoption, right? So we see companies increasingly taking a top-down approach, which means making bold decisions on strategic use cases to shift what we call agile workflows, which is underpinned by technology, obviously, to drive customer value and also the business value very simultaneously. So we believe that the wholesale enterprise-wide digital transformation is a thing of the past. This certainly requires a bit of a change in approach, which is basically taking the client's desired use case as our starting point in the transformation process, right? And then you talked about the sectors, and you asked a question about, which sectors do we really see? And I do agree with Anuj and Sandeep broadly in terms of the classification of sectors, but we put them into sort of three different buckets. Right? One was around, the digital transformation was long overdue in some of the sectors, of course, but it took really a crisis for them to get going, right? I mean, the examples were, I think it was retail, hospitality, healthcare, delivery, and so on and so forth, right? So obviously during the pandemic, we saw the retail sector emerge as a front runner. Successful businesses demonstrated resilience, obviously, by leveraging platforms-based, business models, data, artificial intelligence, and whatnot. So we won't go there. Second bucket we find is some of the sectors where transformation was, of course, well underway. The pandemic has actually spurred them to go much faster. Again, Sandeep talked about banking, insurance are all great examples of that bucket. Both in banking and financial services, we have seen an acceleration of investments into artificial intelligence-powered predictive analytics. I mean, Sandeep, you talked about digital banking across the value chain with fundamental impact on the customer experience, and of course, business strategy and operational process. So that was the second bucket. The third, of course, there are, let's call it others, that we're already well ahead of the curve, but for which, of course, COVID has introduced even more challenges. For example, life sciences. Of course, as you know, in life sciences, the races for vaccines, and of course, we are seeing rise in demand for digital solutions and so on and so forth. So you will find that they have no choice but to sort of really get this right, understanding the broader implications that they have on the larger ecosystem. So that's the sort of the broad categorization, and we can get into some of the details of how these individual sectors are functioning, Mahalakshmi, if you like.
Sure.
If I can add, we looked at this in the context of the NASSCOM report as well, specifically from an end customer business model perspective. We called it DTX, right? So direct to consumer. But if you broaden the definition, as Sandeep and Rajesh talked about, which is digital to everything, end-to-end kind of customer journey being digitized, that business model transformation that's taking shape, that alone is a $50 to $70 billion worth of new opportunity that services clients can go after. Obviously, this would require capabilities around journey redesign, experience management, omni-channel interactions, personalization, and would require the underlying technology capabilities that Sandeep and Rajesh talked about. So I think that is one point I would highlight. The second point I would highlight is, given the focus on business imperatives digitization, all of a sudden the spend is shifting from let's invest in technology to what is the business imperative that we are trying to digitize. And as a result of that, what we are seeing is increasing, moving up the stack. It is about what is the vertical solution we are going to deploy and what business value we're going to get. And technology is obviously an enabler of it, right? So that's another shift I would highlight in this context.
I was about to come to that because there was one data point I really loved in your report, which said that the tech intensity is going up from 3% of revenue to 5% of revenue, and that you said requires a different approach by companies in terms of how you engage with clients or organize yourself. So my question is to both Rajesh and Sandeep, and maybe Puneet can also dive in. Is that what is going to shape how much of the growth you're going to capture over the next 3 years? Or is it a wider basket of portfolio? How do you really approach from a client perspective?
I'll say what I think I'm doing, and then of course, Sandeep, please to jump in as well from your point of view. Look, I think technology has gone from being very discreet to being pervasive, and this is something which all of us know. And the decision makers in business and are not just technology buyers anymore. So when you look at the purchase dynamics are changing, and I don't remember that from the report. I did see the report, but I don't remember this 2% to 5% thing which you talked about. But look, today the CIO CTO population is only responsible for 22% of the purchasing decisions, whereas this was about 48% 5 years ago, right? So, but increasingly the line of service business buyers are the primary decision makers. And they're looking for partners with domain experience, expertise, and a point of view on business pain points. And again, Anuj mentioned about this whole, leading with the business pain points and agile workflows as opposed to sort of leading from technology, infrastructure, etc. Right? So I believe every company has a very unique technology fingerprint, and so our heritage in client centricity is going to be a real differentiator for all of us, right? And talent is central to exceptional client service, and of course we place a very, very high value on continuous learning capability, and then of course we can go on and all of that, and it's why we believe that it has to be a very business driven approach to many of this. But I'll turn it over to Sandeep. I'm sure Sandeep, you probably have a different view. Yeah.
No, not different view, but I'll just sort of and I want to reference, just before I get into it, I want to reference, I think, a part of the NASSCOM report, which, by the way, Anuj, that was an excellent piece of work that was done. But I think when I recall the preview that we heard about the report, right, there was one point that was, we had quite a bit of debate around, and it was this notion about the emergence of the platform economy, which is, sort of you build once and then you have multiple tenants across those platforms. And with the evolution and the maturity of technology, we are starting to see those. Now, by very nature, those platforms are difficult to build with a lot of small organizations. Those are typically built with larger organizations, and then you have others participate in it. And it's something which I'm actually very familiar with, because in the financial services space, which I've spent most of my time on, a few years ago, we actually started to do that in the insurance space. For example, with MetLife, we built our platform, which now others are participating in. We did that with, Food Trust, for example, which is now, come together as a blockchain kind of a platform that multiple organizations are participating in. More recently, we announced, the financial services cloud with Bank of America. So I think we will continue to see a lot of this transformation being, call it pioneered, or where you start to create new business models for an industry with larger clients and larger companies. But the intent of that should not be protectionist in any way, shape, or form, because the notion about build once and then scale it across multiple clients, even smaller clients, and give them an opportunity to participate across these platforms in a variety of different ways. That, I think, is a trend that we will start to see become more mainstream. It's not there today. And I think a lot of the debate today comes up with, well, if you have a large company or a large couple of companies building out these platforms, why should they let others compete in it? But when you actually think about the competitive frontier, right? As long as you can protect what is it you're selling, so your product designs, your unique USP and so on, how you're selling or how you are interacting with customers, which is sort of the customer interaction, customer journey that you play with, and how you price it or how you bundle your offerings. As long as you can protect that, a lot of the back end, right, becomes very fungible and very sort of repeatable in some respects across many industries. And that evolution, I think, we are going to start to see, particularly as Puneet rightly said, the speed at which clients want to sort of move within weeks, within months. That, I think, we are going to start to see evolve in a fundamentally different way.
Sandeep, you just preempted my question, because that is exactly the question I was about to ask you. That you have created all these co-created platforms, like even in a small space like SREI for the infrastructure equipment marketplace.
Yes.
So does this depend a lot on the industry structure? Intuitively, it's a no-go. If there are 4 large players in a market and one creates, and that to be the platform where everybody else takes tenancy, that's intuitively seems like a no-go. So how does this really work?
So I think it's the industry economics, and then also the industry workflow dynamics. I think that have a lot to do with it, for a lack of a better term, I think. So I mentioned one of the first ones that we experimented with, which was in insurance, right? And that would have been about 5 years ago. Even the discussion of that would have been almost like forbidden. I mean, my God, how could you even say that, right? Because you've got data and this and that. How do you ever even have that discussion? But that is where I think the design of it was one of those things where for the industry, it was extremely important to bring that overall cost of transactions down. And for that industry, and again, where that became really relevant was in the small and mid-market enterprise. It was a company that was trying to go after the small to mid-market enterprise, where you needed to have a much more commoditized product or a commoditized bundle of offerings, right? Which didn't have that much of differentiation, right? You did need to have a pricing structure that would be pretty unique, because that's how you get how you interact with customers and brokers was very different. And as long as that could be protected, a lot of the back end probably was extremely fun. So where they saw the value is if they had to go touch their core systems to re-engineer it, just to touch it would cost probably a few $1 million. So they didn't want to do that. And over a period of time, they realized that if you could have more players on it, where they don't invest in the capital in that entire property. So this was entirely built on the cloud. It was run as a software as a service, which IBM does, and we offer it as a software as a service. You basically start to create a capital light, virtual cost model for a lot of fungible, repeatable processes that are not that differentiated across multiple players, right? So that was one. So there, the industry dynamics were all about faster time to market, lower cost, variable cost, all the rest of it. When you look at a different, platform like the Food Trust or TradeLens, which was a blockchain-based supply chain, a virtual supply chain, I think what was critical was being able to have an irrefutable audit trail of transactions. Again, cost efficiencies was key, but also getting to a level of trust. Now there, data sharing was a big issue. And this is where a company like IBM became the data Switzerland in some respects, to ensure that, there was permissioned access across the right levels of data across the board, right? And iQuipo that you talked about, our very own, one in India, there the issue was creating a fundamentally new business model where you wanted to create a marketplace, right? To create the ability to have multiple people participate. It was almost, think about it like financial inclusion in the domain of infrastructure financing. How do you create financial inclusion for companies with different risk appetites, right? And different sizes to participate within a model where infrastructure financing was required by different kinds of clients. So if you had a risk appetite to take on a more risky book of business, you had the ability to do that. And you became, the Shrey that became the developer of this.
Yeah.
They wanted to be the convener of it more than anything else and get more into the services business by de-risking some of their portfolio. So I think the fundamental priorities or why people want to do it will be different industry by industry. But this is where I think the relevance, how do you create relevance within the digital ecosystem that is forming and the white space opportunities that are forming around that becomes, I think, the thing that defines how these platforms will evolve.
Sure. Puneet, you speak to a wide variety of clients as well. So when you speak to various stakeholders in an industry, different companies, does such camaraderie exist where people are willing to keep this aside and say, hey, these are shared use cases that we can work with together and collaborate on a platform that my competitor has developed with IBM?
I don't think we're fully there, Mahalakshmi, but I think people get the logic behind it.
The economics prevails in the end.
No, I think I'll tell you 2 or 3 things, right? And I agree with Sandeep and Rajesh and Anuj, right? I think this is a secular trend. It's happening across sectors, but discontinuities like this drive companies to step back and change, right? And there hasn't been a discontinuity of this scale ever, right? And that is, I'll give you 3 examples of the change that I'm seeing. First, there is openness to platforms today. People realize the value, right? Of course, we got to, as providers, Sandeep, I, Rajesh, Anuj, all of us have to simplify this and make it work for our clients, but people get the value, right? The other thing I'm seeing is I was talking to a fairly large bank in India, and they said, we don't have the patience to kind of lift and shift or refactor our applications. Why don't we just go the ISV route? Look at the 8 or 10 processes that matter for us and just work with them off the shelf solutions, right? It'll save us time, money, and years of progress, right? And I'm seeing banks today buy software and applications for companies which are younger than my daughter. Right? It never used to happen in India, right? So I'm seeing openness on that like never before. And then third, what I'm seeing is a little bit of a bottom-up organic movement, right? Which is democratization of technology with APIs, right? APIs becoming the gateway to information, and our ability to link systems and processes together is much more powerful than it was ever before, right? So if you bring these 3 things together, customers are wanting to change. They're open to new ideas. Our ability to pull together solutions, and even as a ecosystem, as a tech ecosystem, as Sandeep, you called it, and bring this together. Because customers today tell me, listen, 3 things, right? 1, solve my business problems. Don't show me cool tech. As Anuj said, I don't care about SageMaker and what you're building. Tell me, come solve my problem. Second, be prescriptive. Bring the ecosystem together. I don't care who's building what. I want to solve a problem and move quickly. And third, simplify and move at speed, right? So if I bring all of this together, I don't think we have too far, Mahalakshmi, from that day when, as Sandeep said, this will really come together.
Anuj, how are you seeing CIOs really reprioritize their spending?
Yeah. So as we went through the last 12 to 18 months, we obviously worked very closely with the CIOs. We also kind of surveyed and interviewed them as we were doing the NASSCOM work. And I would say 4 main observations that really stood out for me. Right. First, 70% of the CIOs basically said either there is going to be no change or a slight increase, but more importantly, reprioritization of the spend from run to change and transform. Right. So the first message is, it's, if anything, it's growing or stable, but there is a significant reprioritization happening underneath. Exactly as you said, the reprioritization, the top 3 spend categories that we picked up was 1, business digitization initiatives. The second was around cloud. And then the third was around cyber and data privacy. Right. in terms of what were the main buying preferences that they were focusing on as they were evaluating, different service providers, I would say speed is the new cost, right? So agility is what they really focus on, as some of the panelists just talked about. The second, time to impact, is very important. And then the third one that I would highlight is, it is truly about differentiated offerings and capabilities. It is not about I have these skills. They really want to know that you actually have a track record and you have these propositions that are proven propositions that will ensure that you will deliver it with speed and ensure impact, right? So those are, speed, time to impact, and finally differentiation of the proposition. Those were the main buying preferences. And lastly, I would say 60% of the CIOs did talk about consolidation of their partner ecosystem, right? So there's a lot of kind of fragmentation in that, and the imperative kind of the pandemic forced them to revisit that, and there is a focus on trying to do the consolidation. As we probe that deeper, I would say there is a shift to scale and specialization, right? So scale because you can have one player come in and provide the full breadth of services, and specialization because that is where the speed and the really kind of differentiated capabilities and talent comes into play.
And Puneet, in terms of cloud transformation itself, is there a change in thinking in terms of using cloud for mission critical IT, especially how are large and small companies really think about this transition? I mean, is there greater level of trust? Because now I think one of you said that cloud reacts well to uncertainty, which may be a very important thing that people may have realized post pandemic. But that apart, is the trust level better, or is it just that it's come to a stage where it is unavoidable?
I don't think it's an unavoidable framing of the conversation, right? I think trust is there. I think we have to continuously work every day to build the trust. I think on your specific question on what kind of workloads and is it moving to the core and the critical IT workloads beyond the periphery, the answer is yes. In the last 12 to 18 months, right, what we have seen, and I'll give you some examples of customers using this in a meaningful way. Let's start with data. Customers are now telling us that, listen, legacy data storage hardware is great at creating data silos and locking you into hardware refresh cycles. But if you want to move fast, make decisions, pivot as the world around you becomes more and more dynamic and hard to predict, you need to be on the cloud. I'll give you an example of Vistara, right? They're running pretty much most of their core workloads in AWS cloud today, and they're using data in a very differentiated way to figure out patterns of route and route profitability, right? Which allows them to be effective in an environment like this. Let's talk about core workloads. SAP, right? It's just very core to most large organizations today. If I look at RBL Bank, if I look at DSP Investment Managers, I look at L&T Infotech, Brigade Group, Max, I could go on. But they're all migrating some of their core technical complex workloads onto the cloud, again, for the same reasons, right? Speed, as Anuj said, agility, ability to ramp up and ramp down, cost, pay as you drink, also leverage and access a ton of new services and innovation that's coming your way, right? Because once you're on a platform like AWS, as an example, you have access to 200 plus services, right? So your developers can look at analytics, they can look at AI, ML, they can look at IoT, and that just completely unleashes a different level of innovation in the organization beyond what you started with.
Rajesh, when you look at the big picture, how much of it do you see settling down as hybrid cloud versus businesses which can go the whole hog?
Look, I mean, as a provider, I mean, we don't necessarily go too much into whether our clients would want to do hybrid cloud versus any other cloud. I mean, we have all of the folks in the cloud providers are partners. But we strongly believe that to effectively adopt a cloud-led technology model, the businesses must create a very cohesive, well-aligned hybrid strategy to begin with, right? And then, of course, you'll see that almost all the businesses are now investing resources to spend their transition to digital by sort of truly understanding what their steps are going to be. So in that case, clearly, if hybrid plays a big role for them, so be it, right? So I think we believe that, and you talked about this critical IT in your previous question, same thing, right? I think there are certain pockets where we believe that people are still don't want to go all log into cloud and then commit too much in many ways. So I think if hybrid works well, but I always believe that to make the hybrid work, it's not that easy. So you got to be very, very, strategic in terms of how do they sort of really go about making sure that the hybrid is actually going to be working for them. Yeah.
And Sandeep, in terms of cyber security services and products, what is the risk perception amongst companies now? And how much of it do you think is founded and how much of it is unfounded? I mean, in the past 1 year, for example, what kind of acceleration have we seen in terms of bridging that, putting those fears to rest?
So look, the NASSCOM report, I think, said it. I think I'll give you a couple of other data points. But net, I think cyber security will continue to be the risk of this decade. We're going to have to be really cautious. We've seen a significant number of increase in this cybersecurity attacks that we see across the board, be it pharmaceutical manufacturers, energy companies, all kinds of things, right? So in a recent study that we did, so we have this X-Force Threat Intelligence Index that we put together, and 2021 X-Force Threat Intelligence Index, I think, revealed very similar results, highlighting that India in particular was the second most attacked country in Asia Pacific, and it made up for a significant percent of all the attacks that were observed in Asia. So the threat is real, and I think we are at a point now where I think this is no longer an IT issue as such, right? This has become a board issue, a board level issue, where companies and boards are requiring managements of companies to harden their entire infrastructure, their entire whatever cloud environments, on-prem environments, others, with a zero tolerance approach in the security strategy, and have a very robust mechanism to monitor, detect, and contextualize dynamic behaviors and movements across their entire environment. One of the other things, another data point, which I think will I think bring this point home, is we did the CEO study that I referenced for 2021. It also revealed that enterprises which had outperformed through unprecedented challenges had heightened focus on cybersecurity as a discipline, and this is where they've even cited security and risk as areas where they expect technology in particular, right, to have the greatest impact. I think this is something which is here to stay, but it's more important that we need to think about it in a very dynamic way, because I think as we start to strengthen our company environments and technology environments, I think the hackers and the bad guys out there, they are continuing to sort of learn from that and start to get more and more sophisticated. So I think this is one of the things that we will continue to see a significant focus on. We are obviously very focused on it as in terms of what we do with our security stack, as well as security operating centers and others that we build out. But this is something which is going to become very relevant as we move forward.
Anuj, with digital transformation so strongly underway and becoming more and more core to many businesses, do you really see more and more big companies taking ownership of their digital businesses and the teams? And I would want Rajesh to come in on what does this mean for the service providers. I know we have a runway of growth. Maybe this question also is a tad early, but still.
Yeah. No, it's very important and relevant question. I would start by saying, as the companies undertake at-scale digitization efforts, right? No longer just a sprinkling of digital initiatives across the board. The enterprise stack is going to look completely different, right? As we talked about in the discussion. That enterprise stack would be built on a lot of platform choices that they would make, right? So there is, yes, the aspiration might be want to keep internal, but there is no denying the fact that the future enterprise stack, if they want it to be continuously updated and built on the best innovation that's out there, it would be based on a lot of kind of platforms that come together. So the reliance on the platform partners is definitely there. When it comes to stitching it all together and making it all work in a very seamless manner, in a secure manner, there again, it is no longer about having talent that has certain technology skills. You need productized and really IP-backed offerings to do those things in a differentiated manner, right? And that again comes from repetition and rhythm and constant investment in IP to do the same things of managing the architecture, integration, cybersecurity in a truly differentiated manner, right? So again, becomes very hard to do that if you are just kind of you are the only one investing in that talent pool and in that innovation, right? And that is where the service providers come into play in terms of their unique value addition. Having said that, at the same time, if I take AI as an example, right? How AI is being deployed in the end-to-end business processes, there are absolutely areas where they feel that it is so core to their strategic advantage that the reluctance to just kind of completely rely on a provider is very high. The balancing point is, yes, the aspiration is to do it internally, but it's very hard to find the talent and constantly retain the talent and groom the talent. And there again, even providers who have at scale practices around these areas struggle to kind of retain the talent, right? It becomes very hard if you are one company to attract that. So I think there are a lot of kind of variables at play, but I would say it'll be there, but only in niche areas where it is really core to the IP. Outside of that, the collaboration with the service providers will continue.
Rajesh, in your lifetime, you don't have to worry about this question, but you can have a shot at this question anyway.
I will. I mean, look, we all agreed that the industry itself is at an inflection point as far as digital adoption is concerned. So we see growing client interest in realizing more sort of immediate customer and business value by identifying use cases, as I said before, to sort of shift to the agile digital workflows, right? So this means transforming processes to become really agile and data driven and automated. And the way I look at it is in actually three phases, right? So the phase one was clients start to understand what the hell is this digital, what does it really mean? What does it mean to their industry? What does it mean to their companies, right? So then the second phase around is, so they implemented digital experiments, and they always looked at projects at the end of the enterprise, or the edge of the enterprise, as they say, right? So they really didn't get anything to the core, but they were sort of experimenting with what's happening around the edges of the enterprise. And the third phase was actually, where people really realize that they must be software-driven enterprise, irrespective of the business that you are in, industry that you are in. You got to sort of somehow get towards the notion of software-driven enterprise, and to do that, the digital has to be on their core. So that is the three big steps in some ways, and I think people are sort of marching towards it. Some are in phase one, some are in phase two, and then some are in phase three. And of course, I also believe that now more and more companies are increasingly decisive about their technology priorities, and then focus on of course cost savings and all of this, fine. But how do you reduce capex, resilience and agility, and then and I think Anuj talked about is moving from this run the business to sort of change the business model, and a lot of shifters we're seeing this. We're also seeing a lot of vendor consolidation trends actually. So companies like us probably benefit from some of that. But I think you also look at it as saying that it's probably better for us to have a very focused and then the right kind of partners with the right reputation in the digital space and so on, so right. So everything, if you ask me a question as to how do we look at it from a Cognizant point of view, I think everything that we are doing as a company, from our strategy to solution portfolio to partnership to M&A, you take it, branding and marketing, talent, everything is focused on being one of the biggest beneficiary of this new shift, if you may, or the new phase in the digital. So that's all we do.
Sandeep?
So I'll make a couple of points, and maybe I'll take a slightly different approach to this. I think today, every single company, I think, is becoming a digital business, as I said, not because it can, because it must, because that's sort of the ecosystem in which they are operating. But I want to sort of draw a very specific reference to the fact that with acceleration of digital, I think, and the creation of these digital ecosystems that I talked about, you are starting to see new business models and new revenue pools that I think are forming, which companies are now starting to take advantage of through distinctive digital models. And to do that, I think this is where Rajesh made this point around, the focus on hybrid cloud. I think, a recent study we did, I think, demonstrated that companies are starting to see about a 2.5% times more value coming from hybrid cloud infrastructures, where you actually have orchestration to manage across multiple cloud properties, on-prem properties, because everything is not going to sort of convert to a single cloud overnight. You will have this mix of different environments which you'll have to orchestrate around, which is a lot of our Red Hat investment and others is based on in terms of creating that orchestration. But it also implies that as you start to build out these new digital businesses, right? So case in point, the new network telco cloud that we've sort of talked about with Bharti Airtel, Vodafone, and others. In addition to creating that as a hybrid cloud that they are doing to make their businesses more efficient, it is serving as a platform for them to create new digital offerings as 5G becomes a reality and edge computing is going to become real, right? New revenue pools, new businesses that will get created through this accelerated digitization. The discussion we had about iQuipo actually is the digital baby of Shrey, very similar business model, right? But one that actually starts to open up at a larger scale. The work that we've been talking a lot about with Yono, for example, that State Bank of India has launched, that is actually their new digital offering where they are bringing together a financial marketplace, again, digital ecosystem, right, of providers, not all of them they own, but are federated providers that have now created a whole new digital channel and a digital business for them. So this notion of every company starting to become a digital business in itself and has the ability to capture some of these new revenue pools and new business models that are emerging, I think that is real. And all of this digital transformation is actually moving you to actually capture those revenue pools.
Last question, Puneet, how do you see AWS business in India 3 years out?
First of all, I just want to kind of close the loop on what Sandeep said and Rajesh said. Right? I think just 2-3 things. One, I think the value of tech and cloud is clearer than ever. We've all said it. Cloud reacts well to uncertainty, so on and so forth. Second, I think we've seen democratization of technology today. Be it platforms, be it ecosystems. 2 people sitting in a Starbucks today have more access to compute, database, and storage than large organizations with millions of dollars of budget used to have. So if you're a large business in India today, the challenge is not so much build versus buy and all of those questions. Right? The challenge is how do you orchestrate and get the best of, and Anuj, you said it, scale and specialization, right? How do you bring those technologies together? You don't need to build everything. You don't need to run everything. You need to orchestrate. You need to figure out a muscle to leverage a lot of that, right? So that to me is, but I think back on the AWS question, listen, we're just thrilled with the opportunity in the market. We're continuing to invest. We're innovating really fast. And I think there's a real network effect, right? Going back to the platform point that was made earlier today, we've got hundreds of thousands of customers, enterprises, digital businesses, ISVs, SMBs, startups. And to me, I think the real power is if we can bring this ecosystem together, right? The next generation of startups will actually come from the enterprises. The SMBs of today will be the enterprises of tomorrow. How do we really get this ecosystem going and continue to invest behind these businesses as they grow on the platform? I think that's what I'm really thrilled about.
Sure. Rajesh, what is your growth aspiration for the next 3 years? Where do you want to see the stock?
Are you talking about our business in general or business in India? Business in general.
Well, business in India, but more relevant will also be business in general.
Oh, so no, look, our business in India is relatively small. I think, we're scaling up big time in India. But if you look at the business overall, we are at the right inflection point. I think when I look at the next 4 or 5 years, we really see that our ability to, we're probably one of the very few companies as a group which can truly make this transformation for many of our clients, right? So the ability for, you all talked about, having a certain infrastructure and a certain solution, but you do need to, put them all together in the business context. We did have this discussion about saying that, how do you start from the top and then sort of get down all the way to ensuring that the clients are getting the benefit of everything that we do. And I believe that, if just go back and look at the amount of, just in the last 12 months, we spent $1.6 billion in terms of buying companies which are actually going to add a lot of digital assets to what we do as a company. So it's fundamentally, it's a new organization today. I mean, Cognizant is very different from what it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago in terms of understanding the space a lot better, and then, you know, truly ensuring that we as a company have the right level of tools in our bags to sort of go and truly make the differentiation to ensure that we are able to grow. So yeah, very, very positive looking forward, both in India as well as globally. Yeah.
Sure. Sandeep, how much of your business in India do you think will be driven through partnerships with the government? How do you want to tap that pie?
So look, I mean, yeah, this is a question I get a lot, and if I just look at my current business today, a lot of it comes from government in some way, shape, or form. You know, I think we serve 7 out of the 10. This was pre-amalgamation, but I think 7 or 8 of the top public sector banks. We serve a lot of public sector clients like IOCL and others, and we do a lot with the government directly. So I think that focus on continuing to do more and more with the government, and as I think we saw during the pandemic, a lot of the work with ICMR, some of the work that we're doing with the departments of agriculture, leveraging weather company data for precision agriculture, etc., that work continues, as well as a ton of work in the education space in terms of skilling and others. So work with the government, I think, will continue to be a major component of the business as we continue to grow.
Anuj, how do you see things in 3 years in terms of numbers? You've already put it out there, but what is going to be the complexion of businesses in terms of digital intensity 3 years out?
Yeah. I would say, 4 points on that. First, I would say, going back to where we started the discussion, if you take the mix of global 2000 customers, which is kind of often the primary target segment that a lot of service providers go after, that mix is going to look fundamentally different 5 years from now. The pace at which, the digital natives, the digital, tech natives, digital reinventors are kind of, driving growth in their market capitalization versus the traditional players, they would form a significant share and hence would drive a significant portion of the tech consumption by that pool, right? So that's point one. Second point I would say is obviously great time for an opportunity for the industry, just given the growth that is expected, but almost, 600 to 700 billion of that, 1.2 trillion of opportunity is going to be around cloud, industrialized AI, cybersecurity. So these are, must-have and must-win capabilities for the service providers. The third point I would highlight is the role of hyperscalers, SaaS players, and other kind of platform players, right? As we discussed, the enterprise technology stack is going to look very different. And as Puneet mentioned, the focus of the service providers would be around orchestration, right? Really managing that secure enterprise and orchestrating that platform. And finally, the providers would need to kind of revisit where they play, what opportunities like omnichannel, DTX ecosystem that we talked about, where they invest their energies in terms of driving new growth. Asia would emerge as another important point in that choice point. They would have to continue to really up their game in terms of reskilling and investing in digital talent pool. And finally, it will be all around speed, quality of offerings, and so the investment in productized service offerings would be very, very important.
Thank you so much. It was a lovely conversation. I'm just reminded of a quote by Satya Nadella in one of his speeches. He was saying the best kept secret in the technology industry is that we only have beginnings of a solution, never the solution. It's not a constant in time because business itself is not a constant, neither is technology. I guess with respect to this new normal in terms of digitalization, we have the beginnings of more than the beginnings of a solution. So more power to you, gentlemen. Thank you so much for this discussion and all your insights. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mahalakshmi.